Heroes have been with us for as long as there has been an us. Heroic characters allow for us to see an example of bravery, compassion, and generally just good behavior that helps to inspire new generations to idolize them and try to become like their favorite moral exemplars. But sometimes we don't always get it right, and this is one of those times. Zootopia is a very odd film. Its message is muddled and confusing, its world makes very little sense, and its protagonist makes Judge Dredd look like a paragon of virtue in comparison. Judy Hopps is a horrible protagonist for a kids' movie, and I would like to show you why. But first, before we go into it, I just want to tell you a story about the making of Zootopia. Get your seatbelts, because you're gonna need them. The writing for what would later become Zootopia was very, very interesting, to say the least. Just bear with me here, please, because this is going to get very, very confusing very quickly. Byron Howard, the creator and director of this film, pitched 6 different drafts of his idea to Disney Animation CEO John Lasseter, and of those 6, none of them became Zootopia. In fact, the only thing that any of them had in common whatsoever is that they all involved animals in some way. Among these pitches were a concept for a movie about a pug bounty hunter in space, and a mad scientist who turned children into animals. But what ultimately got Lasseter's attention in the most hilarious way imaginable was the idea of anthropomorphic animals living in a modern city. And John Lasseter was apparently so happy about this idea that he, and I quote, lifted Byron up like a baby Simba. And so, from there, Zootopia began development as a story about a police officer bunny in a racist city, and no, I'm just kidding, that's not what happened at all. They went with the space pug thing instead. Or at least that's what Lasseter said he was most inspired by, which is very, very confusing because he had previously said that he was most interested in the whole animals in a modern-day city idea, which the space pug thing was not at all. But that's what he said he wanted Byron to use as inspiration for the movie. This movie was going to be called Savage Seas originally, and would star a rabbit character who was a spy going on an international mission. Now, I thought this was a very funny coincidence, because for those of you who don't know, my persona is not this guy. I'm sorry, buddy. It's literally a rabbit who is also an international spy. You take my ideas, Byron, I'm watching you. But anyway, from there, the story continues to change, a lot. So, Byron's next draft was something very, very different, where, there's a whole bunch of racism now in the plot, and that wasn't in any of the other scripts, but we have it now. So, the rabbit disappeared, and instead a fox character took over as the lead. And instead of being a fun action-adventure movie about a spy, instead we got a depressing, violent, dark story about a city where predators are second-class citizens who have to wear shock collars that shock them when they disobey the government.
29THD03.
More like 1984, am I right, ladies and gentlemen? So in this draft, Nick wants to build a theme park where the predators can take off their collars and be free for a little while. Now, hilariously, when the film was tested for audiences, they nearly universally hated Nick because he was an arrogant, mean-spirited jerk. So they made Judy be the main character instead. Now, I have to agree with the test audiences on this one. Nick is horrible. I mean, I really, really hate this character in every single way. He's narcissistic, he's a liar, he's a con man, he's whiny, he's sadistic, so, he's a good role model for the kids. Furries, seriously, get yourself a higher class of dude to simp for. I mean, first it was this con man, and then another con man, and then a demon from hell, and then death. Have some self-respect. So instead of removing Nick from the story, because they rewrote the whole thing anyways, they just decided to make him the secondary protagonist. I mean, sure. And real quick fun fact for you, I'm not kidding about this. Nick's actual middle name is Tiberius. Why? Well, apparently that's a reference to James Tiberius Kirk. I mean, I don't really get that one at all, because it seems like the only thing they have in common with each other is that they're both egotistical, narcissistic jerks. I mean, you could have gone with James for the middle name, but Piberius, sure. Reference to Tiberius. He was a great role model for the kids, too. Well, after that long and storied journey, we got Zootopia, or Zootropolis in Europe. A story about a cop who goes against the grain and stops a conspiracy to turn her city racist, even though it pretty much already is. Let's talk about Zootopia's world for a minute. So this movie is obviously supposed to be a metaphor for racism, but it's a really, really bad one. Because since they decided to keep the skeleton of the previous draft, but change the main character from a predator to a prey animal, the world building now doesn't make any sense at all. So the prey are the ones on top of society. They have all the power. But despite that, Judy is discriminated against by the prey as a prey animal. Like, what were they going for with this? Is the idea that they're misogynistic to her? Like, is this a misogynistic society? It doesn't seem like it. I mean, we see other women in the police department that aren't treated in, like, a different or discriminatory way. And, also, the prey pretty much universally rally behind Bellwether to become their autocratic supreme ruler at the end of the movie, and she's a woman. So it has to be the prey thing, right? But, why do the prey animals hate her so much, then? And also on that topic, this movie does a really bad job of being inclusive and promoting diversity, if that's what they were trying to do, because this movie seemingly confirms the prejudice of the prey. Every single predator in this movie, with one exception, is portrayed as either extremely stupid or a criminal. That's not very good for your movie about diversity, is it? Now, the strange, weird fever dream that is this movie really starts to kick in the more you think about it, and at a certain point, it almost starts to feel like it's gaslighting you or something. The best example of that is Bogo. So, Bogo is the police chief of Zootopia, and he, for no reason at all, hates Judy with a burning, obsessive fury that borders on outright psychosis, and we never learn why. Ever. And that makes it so much more bizarre. Bogo tasks Judy, who is a beat cop, by the way, with becoming an investigator 2 days after she's joined the police department, to solve a kidnapping in less than 2 days. And apparently she is the only missing persons investigator in the whole city, and they just didn't even have that department beforehand, because there is literally nobody else to help her to find this missing man in the entire city. But he also constantly tries to hinder her investigation at every turn, to the point he makes it a full-time gig to try and get her to fail at the cost of this kidnapped man's life. I seriously thought there was going to be a twist that he was the one who kidnapped him, and that Bogo was the one behind the whole conspiracy. That was the only thing that made any sense to me. If that was the case, it wouldn't be that he hates Judy for being a prey animal, it's that he hates her because she's foiling his plan. But no, he just hates her for no reason at all. He's not even working with Bellwether on her evil plan. He's just evil, I guess. Finally, I want to say that it was a very strange choice to do what they did with the end credits. So Gazelle, who is a gazelle because everyone in this movie has a really stupid name, is a famous pop star who is very much in the higher class of this racist society. And she sings the Yes Queen We Did It song at the end to celebrate the fact that the city didn't totally fall into fascism. But isn't that just a little weird that she did that? I mean, imagine if at the end of BioShock Infinite, Jeremiah Fink sang a little Old South ditty about how everyone should get along. Would that feel weird to you? But anyway, let's talk a little bit about the worst part of this movie, Judy Hopps, a bright-eyed, optimistic police officer who saves the day by committing a dozen felonies and aiding in getting a lifelong criminal put on the payroll of the police department. Now, obviously, you all know by now that this character had a very strange history with her development, but one thing I found especially funny was that she was supposed to be a grizzled and jaded cop who was way more serious and cynical, but that idea was totally scrapped because of how much audiences hated it. Well, guys, you made things worse, actually. So in this movie, Judy Hopps is presented as a hardworking cop who wants to prove that she can be a successful prey animal in a world where she's already in the dominant social class, so that's a little bit confusing, but we already talked about the bizarre nature of that dynamic, so let's get into the other reasons why she's a terrible character for children to look up to. Well, let's start with the fact that she breaks the law constantly. Like, all the time. In fact, there's an argument to be made that Judy commits more crimes in this movie than Bellwether does. First of all, during her first confrontation with Nick, she uses the threat of arresting him for tax evasion to force him to help her with her case. And the very strong implication here is that she won't arrest him if he helps her. That's not great. And that motif continues on as we go along. Judy then gets a break when she finds out there's potential evidence inside of a vehicle parked in a gated lot, and so she decides to break into the parking lot and then also break into the car. Now, in case you didn't know, the police can't just enter whatever property they want to. They have to have the consent of the property owner, have a crime in plain sight, meaning like they can actively see someone in danger, or have a signed warrant from a judge in order to search your property. So rest easy, Bellwether, because you're probably going to get out on an appeal due to misconduct on the part of the state. So after breaking into this car, Judy finds out that it belongs to a mob boss, and she and Nick are kidnapped and nearly murdered, but then they become friends with the mob boss because he helped Judy with her case. And she does not report the attempted murder. Are you seeing a theme here? Okay, allow me a brief Nick rant, if I may. Part of the reason that I hate this character so much is because he is so whiny all the time. Like, his reason for why he's become a lifelong criminal who scams people and steals from people and works with violent criminals all the time is because a bunch of 5-year-olds were mean to him like 30 years ago. And so, because of that, that's why he has to now be like a mean-spirited jerk to everybody and also a criminal. So, I don't like him very much. But I saved the best part for last. So after Judy breaks into some more private property and inadvertently helps create a fascist police state under the rule of a psychotic dictator, she then returns to the mob boss to get information out of a suspect, which they acquire by utilizing mob hitmen to torture him into confessing. I'm not kidding, by the way. I'm sure most of you have seen this movie, but in case you haven't, she actually does that. She uses the mafia to torture and threaten to murder a man until he confesses, which I think is usually frowned upon. So overall, Zootopia is a bad movie for children and for everybody else too. It teaches kids that it's cool for the police to commit crimes, let their friends off the hook, and torture suspects, just so long as it's in service of a greater good. And what seed does that plant in a little kid's head? It tells them that when the police beat someone into confessing, or don't use the proper channels to search for evidence, or let their friends go with no punishment, it tells them, well, Judy did that, but that was all in service of a greater good, so it was okay. So there must be some noble reason why that cop did what he did too, right? So that's why I don't like this movie, because that's the kind of thinking that it implants in the minds of young people, which is the exact opposite of what we should be teaching them. And it also muddles and confuses what prejudice actually is, which I don't understand what they were going for with this. This is still one of the most confusing parts of this entire movie to me, and I don't think I will ever be able to fully understand what they were going for with that. So when we're all done, it ultimately just begs the question of, who was this movie even made for? Let me know in the comments below if that was you, and why that was. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Just a couple things. I have a project coming up here that I'm very happy about and that I'm very excited for you all to see. That will be out relatively soon. It's kind of a collaboration in a way with me and another channel. I'm very, very excited about it. I think you guys are really going to like it. Okay, and one other thing I wanted to mention, by the way, I didn't want to link this in the description which you'll see why in a minute. But I wanted to obviously credit the person that did the artwork that I displayed earlier in the video of my rabbit character, this one here. But I just wanted to mention to everybody that if you do go and like look for their stuff, don't do it unless you're 18 or older, because they also make not safe for work art. But anyway, here's their name and, all their aliases, so you can find them if you want to. And I just wanted to give him a shout out because, I don't know, this artwork that he did was so incredibly cool. It's one of my favorite, probably honestly my favorite pieces of artwork that I've ever gotten, and I just wanted the chance to showcase it to everybody. But I also had to give everybody that disclaimer. Like, the reason I don't want to link to it is, obviously I don't want people clicking on something and not knowing what they're in for. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Like the video if you liked it, or dislike the video if you didn't like it, and subscribe for more. That's all for now.